Welcome to Stack Kings Live NFL Edition Week 8. Huge game last night between the Broncos and the Chargers. Nobody knows who's going to win the AFC West, but the Broncos came out on top last night. Peyton Manning throwing for 286 and 3 touchdowns, 124.2 quarterback rating. That's insane. 3 of them went to Emmanuel Sanders. Also, Demaryius Thomas with 105 yards on 12 targets.
Tell you what, this Denver Broncos team has really come out more aggressive the last couple of weeks. Ronnie Hillman, 20 carries for 109 yards. He looked very good. The only guy that didn't put up those numbers was Wes Welker. 2 receptions, 5 yards. What do you think's going on with Wes Welker, Tony?
Retirement.
Retirement?
He's done. I think he's going to retire. He's not in the game. He doesn't look explosive. Manning doesn't really like to throw it to him anymore. Emmanuel Sanders has basically taken over Wes Welker's role, and I think Wes Welker at the end of the season will retire.
And rightfully so. Emmanuel Sanders is quick. He's very, very tight. He's in and out of those routes quickly. But, Peyton Manning, he said that maybe Wes Welker didn't get much action last night because there's just so many targets, so many weapons on that Denver Broncos offense that it's tough to get everybody involved.
It's just an excuse. It's just an excuse. He doesn't want to throw it to the guy anymore.
Could be.
Phillip Rivers also threw for 252 and 3 touchdowns. That's a pretty good fantasy line. Brandon Oliver was basically non-existent, 36 yards rushing on 13 carries. Keenan Allen, 13 targets, 73 yards, 9 receptions. He could be back. And then Antonio Gates with the 2 touchdowns. Rivers hooked up with him.
Yeah, the Denver Broncos, they've marched to 6-1 now in the season. San Diego Chargers fall to 5-3.
I think the Broncos pretty much will win the AFC West at this point.
They look unstoppable right now, don't they?
Unless Manning gets hit by a car or something, no offense. I mean, I just don't really know how else they could lose, right? I mean, man.
Not at this point.
Moving on to the injury report. What do you got for us, Frank?
A.J. Green, the toe. He will not practice today, but don't rule him out playing on Sunday. That still could be a game-time decision. Calvin Johnson, the ankle, he remained limited at today's practice. Eric Ebron, the hamstring, also remained limited at practice today. Brandon Pettigrew, the foot, he remained sidelined at practice today. Reggie Bush, the ankle, did not practice again today, but said that he wants to play Week 8. We'll see what happens there. And finally, on a side note, we have free agent quarterback Kevin Kolb has retired from the NFL. He had previous stints with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Arizona Cardinals. Kind of sad to see him go, Tony.
Well, he had a lot of potential for a while. Obviously drafted by Andy Reid, moved over to the Cardinals. But, hey, that's the way the NFL works. You're in, you're out.
Yep.
Moving on to quarterback, we're going to go right into the show. My best player on the board at QB is Drew Brees, $14,758. He's playing at home against Green Bay. Vegas has this over-under at 54 points, so they expect it to be a scoring fest. In his 2 home games this year, Drew Brees has thrown for 332 passing yards a game and 2 touchdowns. In his last 5 night games, now these are primetime games, and Brees loves the spotlight, 125 quarterback rating, 347 passing yards a game, and 3.2 touchdowns. Those are very impressive numbers. He's got Jimmy Graham back this week. I expect a shootout at the OK Corral at the Superdome.
Hey, that very well could come true. I'm sticking with a guy that I've taken now 3 weeks in a row at quarterback, and that's Russell Wilson, the Seattle Seahawks. He's playing against the lowly Carolina Panthers. He is priced at $18.6K, the second most expensive quarterback on the StatKings.com board this week. However, I think he matches up very well. You saw his dominant performance last week where he had over 37 StatKings.com fantasy points, 70 rushing yards in the fourth quarter alone. Here's a guy, again, who can beat you with his arm, beat you with his legs. I look for him to absolutely dominate, shred this Carolina Panthers defense this week. 6 of 7 quarterbacks against Carolina this season have thrown multiple touchdowns. I think it's going to be a big week for Russell Wilson.
What happened to the Panthers? Gee, they were great last year. They stink this year. I don't know what
Falling
happened.
apart.
Unbelievable.
Falling apart. But if the lofty cabbage you'll have to be willing to eat reeks of a bust this week, there are a couple other quarterback options. You have Tony Romo against Washington. Washington's been very poor against the pass this year. Alex Smith versus St. Louis. Alex Smith showed some flashes last week. You have Teddy Bridgewater at Tampa Bay, could be a sleeper. Kyle Orton gets a start. I like him against the New York Jets this week. And you have Carson Palmer opposite Philadelphia. We'll see how his shoulder holds up.
All good picks. All good picks. Moving on to running back. I'm going to pick a guy that I think is an up-and-coming back in the league. His name is Jerick McKinnon for the Minnesota Vikings. $5,200. That's right, $5,200 at Tampa Bay.
Wow.
He's now the featured back. He out-touched Matt Asiata 21-7 last week. Norv Turner loves this guy. He's a Georgia Southern product. He stands 5'9", 208. He's quick. He's explosive. And here's how explosive he is. And the Nike invented a player evaluation scale called SPARK. Okay, it measures a player's pure athletic ability. An elite NFL athlete is between 140 and 150 range. That's like the Calvin Johnsons and the Vernon Davises. McKinnon scored a 147.5, one of the highest scores in the past 16 years. Past 16 years. That means this guy's fast and explosive. In the last let me say that again. 2 of his last 4 games, McKinnon has 100 yards rushing, and Tampa Bay's defense scored a minus 30.2 in Pro Football Focus. That's dead last against the run. That means Tampa Bay is dead last against the run, going against an explosive guy like McKinnon. I think it's a shoo-in. I think you have to play this guy 5,200, an absolute steal.
I absolutely agree. Tampa Bay, he mentions it very well here. Tampa Bay has allowed 8 total touchdowns and the 7th most fantasy points for running backs this year. But what I really like about McKinnon is his yards after contact. He's very Chris Ivory-ish when it comes to yards after contact. He's a ground and pound kind of guy, and he has posted at least 11 StatKings.com fantasy points for the 2nd straight week. I look for him to do some big things against the Buccaneers. Definitely, considering that he absolutely blitzed the Bills last week for 19 carries for 103 yards. The Bills have done very, very well against the run this year so far. So what is he going to do against Tampa Bay? It could be scary.
This guy is a special athlete, a very special athlete. When you score that high on the SPARK, when you're in the likes of Calvin Johnson and Vernon Davis, those type of burners, those type of power, I think you have a chance to be really good in the NFL.
But Tony, if you don't mind spending a little higher dollar for some potential safety, because there's a little bit of risk here with McKinnon, there are some options that exist. You have the dual threat PPR back in Andre Ellington versus Philadelphia. You have the integral Cole Ahmad Bradshaw at Pittsburgh, Matt Forte at New England, or Lamar Miller in Jacksonville.
All good picks, all good picks. Moving on to receiver, my big guy on the board is Randall Corn on the Cob, $12,246 at the Superdome in New Orleans. Cobb has 8 TDs in his last 7 games. Pro Football Focus gives New Orleans defense a negative 10 pass rush score, that's 30th in the league, and a negative 35.2 pass coverage score, 31st in the league. They couldn't cover a high school team or pass rush a high school team right now, which means that you got to like Aaron Rodgers as well as Drew Brees. I like Drew Brees a little better because of their defense is bad, but I still think Aaron Rodgers is going to do something. But I love Randall Cobb, especially with Brees going to be throwing. They're going to extend that game. This is going to be a high-scoring game. Take Cobb in the slot. Big game.
Cobb is really proving himself, and often at one time Jordy Nelson overshadowed Randall Cobb, but I think that the difference is starting to even there. I like Doug Baldwin this week, the Seattle Seahawk wideout at Carolina. He's priced at 5.2K. 5.2K. That's a StatKings.com site minimum. So I think there's a lot of value here, but if you're not convinced, let me talk a little bit about this guy before you just blindly disregard what I have to say. He leads the Seahawks in routes run this year, targets, receptions, and receiving yards. Last week at St. Louis, he found 7 balls for 123 yards and a touchdown, posted 21.8 StatKings.com fantasy points. Percy Harvin is a Jet. That's one less Seattle Seahawk wideout for Russell to throw to. The Panthers have allowed 187 fantasy points this year and 12 receiving touchdowns to the position. That's the most in the NFL. And let's again talk about that value thieving 5.2 minimum for his salary. So you could do a whole lot worse than Doug Baldwin this week.
Honestly, I think you could start Brees, put Rodgers at a flex, and use some of these guys like Baldwin and McKinnon. I think that's a great lineup. Baldwin's going to be playing the slot now that Harvin moves over. That's a much better position for him. I think Russell Wilson can find him easily from there. I think it's going to be the double bubble, Russell Wilson to Baldwin this week. I think that's a great, great play.
Well, he certainly matches up well. But If Baldwin is too sleepy for your eyes, you may opt to receive a dosage of these other favorable pitted hands. You have Mohamed Sanu versus Baltimore, Michael Floyd opposite Philly, Randall Cobb, as you mentioned, at New Orleans, I like a lot, Terrence Williams against Dallas, Kendall Wright against Houston, Mike Wallace at Jacksonville, T.Y. Hilton at Pittsburgh, or Sammy Watkins at the New York Jets this week.
All good plays. All good plays. Moving to tight end, and I'm going to do it, Frank.
Oh, gosh.
I'm doing it right now.
Oh, gosh.
No shirt, Rob Gronkowski.
All right, stay right there now.
$9,263 versus Chicago. Last week, Gronk played 93% of the snaps. I think he's back. Pro Football Focus rates Chicago's defense as a negative 20.2 pass coverage. That's bottom 8 in the league. Look at Gronkowski's home and road splits. At home, he's averaging 70 yards a game with 2 TDs. Away, he's averaging 49 yards. He's at home this week. In his last 3 games, he's averaging 6 receptions and 87 yards. Those are games when he's been playing a lot of snaps. This is the week he busts out. No sure Gronkowski. I got him, baby. 100 and a TD for sure.
Man, it sounds like you have a thing for Gronkowski a little bit.
I love the meathead.
Oh my gosh, I know that's quite evident. We have Jordan Reed. That's my pick this week for the Washington Redskins. He's going up against Dallas. It's my second week in a row taking Reed. I'm all about value here at Stack Kings. 5.2K. Another guy who's a site minimum at 5.2K. He's demonstrated that he's the number 1 tight end in Washington with Niles Paul, definitely the second tight end on the depth chart. You have Reed, who had more snaps and targets in consecutive weeks. I know that Colt McCoy is the guy that's running the show there in Washington. That could scare a lot of people. Perhaps that contributed to Reed's price at 5.2K. But I'll tell you what, I don't think Colt McCoy is going to be straying too far from the hands of Jordan Reed this week.
Colt McCoy can't throw the ball. He can throw the ball about 10 yards, 15 yards. He's got a little bit of running ability. The bottom line is he can get it to Jordan Reed. That's about it. Maybe Carson on a slant. He certainly can't get it to Deshaun Jackson down the field. So I like that pick. I think Jordan Reed set up good, especially with Colt McCoy at quarterback. So I like that pick.
Colt McCoy has demonstrated in previous years that he's good when going to college, and that he's only a college quarterback who has only showed flashes at the NFL level. We'll see what he can do given this opportunity. But he matches up well against Dallas this week, Jordan Reed, that is, because Dallas has been so poor against tight ends. But if you think that Colt McCoy is too much of a risk in getting the ball to Jordan Reed this week, there are a couple other guys that you might want to look at. You have Owen Daniels at Cincy, Greg Olsen at home opposite Seattle. You have Dwayne Allen at Pittsburgh, Zach Ertz at Arizona, Charles Clay at Jacksonville, or the Kansas City Chief. Travis Kelce versus St. Louis could hit the mark with you instead.
All good picks. All good picks. Moving on to kicker, I like Mason Crosby, $5,200. That's a steal. At New Orleans, New Orleans defense gives up 27.5 points a game. Crosby's going to be kicking in the dome. You know Aaron Rodgers is going to be moving the ball on this pathetic defense. I think $5,200 is just a steal. New Orleans has one of the worst 3 defenses in the league, and I don't think you can look anywhere else but Mason Crosby this week. I think he puts up 10-plus points easy.
Another great value at $5,200. You cannot overlook that. I'll tell you a guy who's defying father time, and that is Adam Vinatieri. In his 19th NFL season, the 41-year-old is remaining a competitive kicker in the NFL. Last Sunday, Vinatieri made a 38 and 34-yard field goal and is now converted on all 10 of his field goal attempts this year, a perfect 100%. Through 5 games, Vinatieri ranks second league-wide with 48 kicker points. On the other side, you have the Steelers defense that has allowed a league-worst 17 field goals and 67 total kick points while conceding every field goal attempted against them, Tony, to fill the uprights. A perfect 100% conversion rate. You got to like those odds for Adam Automatic, the Iceman Vinatieri.
19 seasons in the NFL, a shoe-in at the Hall of Fame. I'm just curious, is he a grandfather yet? He's got to be getting close, right?
He's got a little gray here. He's got a little touch of gray there.
Yeah, he could definitely play Santa Claus for Christmas.
Oh, definitely.
Sure.
He's got to get the beard growing, though.
Absolutely.
But I'll tell you, there's a couple other boots that might be worth a kick this week. You have Larry Walsh at Tampa Bay, Cody Parkey at Zona. Caleb Sturgis at Jacksonville, and Greg Zerlin at Kansas City. St. Louis might be in a position where they might be kicking field goals as opposed to touchdowns this week at Kansas City.
I agree with that. Those are all good picks. Moving to defense special teams, I got the Miami Dolphins. I love the Miami Dolphins this week. They're at 4,833. That's a steal at Jacksonville, the worst team in the league. Pro Football Focus ranks Miami as the second best defense in the league overall. Miami has 8 forced fumbles, 17 sacks, and the 4th best pass defense in the league. Jacksonville, on the other hand, is last in points scored at 15. Pro Football Focus also ranks the Jags as the worst passing offense in the league. Expect a low-scoring game with Miami coming out on top. The Vegas over-under is 42.5. It's the lowest this week. The only thing that's lower is the toilet bowl between the Bills and the Jets.
Oh my gosh, yes he did. I'm going to take the Kansas City Chiefs this week going up against the St. Louis Rams. They're priced at $3.6K. I think they provide a very good value this week. They have 60 total fantasy points on the year. The Chiefs were the top fantasy defense last season. 2014 has been a bit of a different story. Still, I like them against the Rams this week. Playing at Arrowhead Stadium, opposing defenses have scored the second most fantasy points when facing St. Louis, and Kansas City scored 16 fantasy points in their last home game. If you're not sold on the Chiefs to stymie the Rams offense this week, there are a couple other viable alternatives. We have Miami and Jacksonville, as you mentioned. I like that pick a lot. We have Dallas versus Washington, Cleveland opposite Oakland, and a sleeper here, Minnesota at Tampa Bay.
The Dallas versus Washington is a good pick too, because with that quarterback in there, that's just not Colt McCoy is just not going to happen. It's not going to happen at all. Alfred Morris on the ground hasn't done much. I think Dallas shuts them down too.
Colt McCoy's in a bit of a tough spot this week. We'll see how he responds. Well, that does it for today's show, guys. Remember, do your research and choose your team wisely if you want to become fantasy sports royalty. I'm Frank Travis. This is Tony Badalucco signing off from Kansas City, Missouri. See you guys in Week 9.
Good luck, guys.